President Trump wrapping up a cabinet meeting hitting on a number of topics, but obviously the major headline today, the ceasefire and hostage deal. The first phase of that deal agreed to between Israel and Hamas. The Israeli cabinet meeting right now to approve that deal. Let's bring in senior White House correspondent Garrett Hake. Garrett, the president saying moments ago that he plans to travel to the Middle East, to Egypt. We don't know when, but he said soon.
That's right, Joe. The president says he wants to be in Egypt soon. He'd like to be there for the release of these hostages, which should start happening Monday or Tuesday. He also said he might be willing to speak in front of the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament, if he's invited to do so. No sitting president has ever done that. He wants to be part of a celebration of this achievement that will go down, if it indeed proceeds as it appears it will, as one of, if not his biggest foreign policy achievement across these two terms. The discussion of this ceasefire deal really dominated this cabinet meeting, shorter than we've gotten used to from the president, with his aides going around the table, heaping praise on him and on each other for their willingness to get this done, working with Arab partners with whom the president has nurtured relationships in these 9 months or so that he's now been back in office. Really a congratulatory mood here over the length of this cabinet meeting today.
Garrett, the fragility of this deal, though, was pretty apparent as the president answered questions, right?
That's right. I mean, the first stage of this is the returning of hostages and the Israeli military set to pull back to a line that we haven't really seen properly demarcated yet. The president was asked about, are we confident that Hamas will even be able to find the bodies of the hostages who are deceased, who they are expected to return? And the president kind of danced around that answer, suggesting that he thinks this will all happen in time, not wanting to engage in hypotheticals about what happens next. But, Joe, this is how things work in this region. You might have the outlines of a deal, you might have the prospect of peace, but the details become thorny and difficult. You also heard the president allude to just even the process that the Red Cross will go through to get the living hostages out and how complex that is. So there's a lot of moving parts between now and Monday or Tuesday when we start to see these hostages, dead and alive, coming out. And it's only after they're released that the next stage, the actual peace part of these negotiations, are set to continue.
And we should note the president was asked about speaking at the Knesset, as you noticed. He felt he might have been the first American president to do that. That is not true. We're told Presidents Clinton, George W. Bush, and Carter have all spoken at the Knesset in the past. Let's bring in NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley, who is in Tel Aviv. Matt, as far as we know right now, the Israeli government is still meeting to go over this deal. Where do things stand?
Yeah, well, it sounds as though the meeting is currently going on with the War Cabinet. That's the smaller cabinet that mostly involves security officials, but also involves some of the far-right ministers in Benjamin Netanyahu's very far-right cabinet. They have already expressed some reticence about the deal. However, they have said that they are basically signing on. Benjamin Netanyahu did a lot of work to corral his far-right into agreeing to this deal. Everybody expects that the cabinet, the smaller War Cabinet, and then the major cabinet, the full government, is going to approve this deal. That's going to start the clock on 24 hours. In those 24 hours, Israel has to withdraw its forces to the yellow line on the map that was released as part of that 20-point plan that, as Garrett mentioned, has only really been seen in macro. We haven't really seen exactly the street-by-street examination of where the Israelis are going to withdraw to. Presumably, that was discussed. But those sorts of negotiations come down to that, feet and yards. And that is what we're going to be seeing after the Israelis withdraw to that yellow line. Then we start 72 hours, during which the Palestinians, Hamas, and its partner organizations are going to have to come up with those 28 dead bodies, the corpses of those hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip, and 28 living hostages. Now, as Garrett mentioned, there are real concerns that Hamas and its partner organizations, its allies, aren't going to be able to find those dead bodies. I spoke with one man who's very close to the Palestinian side of the negotiating team. He said today that a lot of the fighters who buried those bodies have since been killed. So there are plans for an international group to come in representing multiple countries of researchers to try to find those remaining bodies. So all of this still hangs on quite a few different but very narrow threads, and whether or not we get to phase two sometime early next week will determine the tone and tempo of how this proceeds from now on. After those first 96 hours, we're in uncharted territory. Negotiators have not determined what's going to happen after that.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.